Shed Show, the show that is in the shed. Welcome back today. It's getting a little chilly outside. Fall is definitely coming, but we have someone here today that's cooler than fall.
He's not an object.
I mean,
Well,
some people see me as an object.
Benji, give us an introduction.
This is my friend and my former coworker, because he was going to become my future boss. Marshall.
Are you saying that's why you quit? Because he got your future boss, my former coworker,
And then invites him onto the show.
He was going to become my future boss, and I've seen him take 3 naps right next to me. To be fair, he did work out that morning.
And he had worked probably the whole night before and lived at...
He's the hardest worker in the room. Don't denigrate him for his naps.
Let me do a better introduction. We have in the studio
give me the opportunity to give
Marshall Davis. Because you didn't even know his last name. You said, welcome, Marshall.
I know his name's Marshall Davis.
You didn't intro him right. Marshall's a writer, director, and producer who has worked on a handful of films. He is currently working on something that we'll get into a little bit later, but we've seen some of the test footage, I would say. That's what it is, but there's some really cool things in the works for Marshall.
I was really critical of his test footage.
he was, which is actually, criticism is valuable. I love it. I thrive on it.
How long did it take you to get that perspective? Was it early on or like a little bit later in your film career, or like when did you like get used to it?
So in film school, I say I had pretty thin skin before film school. And then in like my first couple of semesters, I kept watching like other students get like super butthurt whenever the people, the teachers would like say, you could probably really work on this and stuff like that. And I was like, and I realized, wow, they're not progressing that fast because they're getting so offended by this stuff. So that was kind of the moment where I was just like, okay, well, from now on, I'm going to seek out insults. On my stuff. I want to,
wow.
Because the thing is like, if everyone's just like, oh, you're so good, then you're just not going to grow. Whereas like people are just like, that sucked. I'm like, great. What sucked about it? This sucked about it. It's like, great. Now I know what to do better next time, right? Once I realized that like I was only going to make better stuff by being torn down, I was like, okay, tear me down.
Oh my god.
That's going to be on his on his gravestone. Tear me down.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I wanted to act like a macho meathead, I'd be like, it's like, well, you gotta tear up the muscles before they grow back bigger, you know, or something like that. Like,
well, let me tell you something. Get like real into the camera.
Here's the truth about filmmaking. You gotta tear down those filmmaking muscles before they can get nice and swole.
7-figure film hustle.
There we go.
There you go.
Was there a specific criticism that you got where you're like, I don't know if I'll agree with that, but I'll go for it. Like, I'll kind of do it. And then you saw a payout at the end?
I mean, I don't have like a specific anecdote that I can pull from, but what I can say is that like criticism is usually found with, I didn't like that. What if you did something like this? And I've never ever found myself doing the, what if you did something like this answer and solving my problem. But it's more that like if somebody says like, oh, this part was kind of slow and boring. What if you like, I don't know, just cut like a minute out of that thing? Maybe the answer wasn't cutting a minute out of the thing. Maybe the answer was adding in some other angles and speeding up, and that makes it feel more frenetic and fast. So it's like it's never, usually the answer is never the complete antithesis of the criticism. It's usually the answer. But when somebody makes a criticism, I know there's a problem there.
Yeah.
Whether it's the problem they pointed out or something else that I have to fix, right?
No, I like that because it's a little bit more strategic where it's like, oh, cut this out because it's slow. And then you're like, well, let's just speed it up.
Yeah.
You're a professional in your field, and so when you get kind of advice either from other professionals or people that aren't in there, that blows my mind, and you can apply that to a million different things, but you're like, they know that something's off. They know either a beat's off or the speed or something, so that's very interesting that you've kind of honed that in, and it's less of like, oh, I have to do exactly what they say, and more of like, what's the real issue?
Yeah.
I'm interested, like, from film school, I know that you've done a bunch of freelance work, and that's a big jump. I don't know necessarily the stories between the jump, but freelance, it sounds like a free-for-all.
The Wild West of freelance. It's true. It's a whole thing. So just to give you a little bit of background to my journey, I guess, before I got to like becoming like a full-time freelancer and then ultimately abandoning that lifestyle. I don't know. You never really quit freelance, you know? It's always with you.
It's a scar? It's a scar? It's a rite of passage?
Yeah. So, I mean, technically I'm still freelancing, right? Even though I'm working full time. I'm just not doing it. I'm not living off of it at this point. It's like, it's now icing on the cake. When I started film school, I kind of decided from the very get-go that I wasn't going to be a full-time student. I was going to be a full-time filmmaker and go to film school at the same time. That said, I still usually took full course loads every semester. semester, so I was just mostly just killing myself. But
do you just like to abuse yourself?
I guess I do.
Mentally and emotionally?
Yeah, I think so. That's probably it. I was also a business minor on top of it. At first, I eventually dropped a minor. I was like, that's just ridiculous. I just need to get out of school. So yeah, I was working full time. So I started off working at BYU TV. I went in there to be like an assistant editor, and then they were like, actually, you really have an eye for this. Maybe you should be a colorist for us. I was like, okay, cool, interesting.
Well, what is a colorist, by the way?
Sorry, yeah. So we take people's hair and we.
You're in cosmetology school.
It's funny. It's really funny that I really run into that problem when I was trying to like do SEO stuff to like find more clients on the internet. Colorist always just brings up hair people, and I'm just like, oh, this sucks. This is a bad title. But yeah, so they found that I had an eye for colorists, and what colorists do is they essentially take footage. The first step is to like basically take all the images within the scene and like balance them so they all feel like they were filmed at the same time. And then you go back and you do a thing called color grading, where you kind of create a style and a look over the whole thing. If you think about Mad Max had like a really kind of orange, warm, intense look. That was color grading.
So you're the guy that does like the filter when people go to Mexico?
There we go. That's
in Breaking Bad.
That's like it. I'm the one who puts the sepia filter on anything in Mexico. That's what my job was. But yeah, so they found that I had like an eye for that. So I started doing that there, and then started Googling and getting on the forums of the colorists, and I realized, holy cow, there's a lot of money in color grading at this point. And so I was like, why am I getting paid these low wages to do this at BYU TV when I could be just freelancing, right? That's when the freelance bug hit me.
Was that entrepreneurship, did that come from minoring in business, or?
I think it just came for...
Was it worth it?
I think it came for a love of money is what it came for.
It came from Mr. Krabs himself.
Yeah. Money. So then I got a credit card. Actually, I got 2 credit cards. Maxed them out for like $30K worth of like color equipment.
Where are you going for your credit cards?
Well, before that, I had worked as a banker at Wells Fargo, so I actually had a pretty good credit reputation for high earning and stuff.
And fraud from Wells Fargo.
Oh, listen, I did not partake.
But you were there at the same time?
Yeah. Well, no, I definitely saw stuff happening. It didn't really happen that much at our branch, but I did see it happening at other branches and stuff like that. So
Wells Fargo, we know.
Okay, you maxed out your credit cards with your perfect credit score.
Maxed out my credit card with my good Wells Fargo credit, and bought all this equipment and set up a color studio I was in my apartment at that time.
Your version of the shed.
Yeah, my version of the shed.
Don't look around like you're
the shed.
You started in a little apartment. Don't even.
This takes me back. And I just started doing color work. So I colored a feature film called Christmas Eve. I colored this like horror film out of LA called like Psychophonia. And then I just kept getting more and more color work. Those were like the bigger projects. And then there was also like a bunch of like commercials and stuff like that. So I color a lot of things, but like that's kind of how it all started out. Beyond that, I also started becoming more valuable to these people I was working with. I ended up picking up some of the editing on some of these projects, and then all of a sudden getting invited to like, hey, can you associate produce us a little bit and help us figure out how to do some of these things with your more like younger perspective. So these were all things I'm doing while going to film school, essentially.
Oh wow!
While going to full-time film school and all that.
There were a few semesters where I took like I think there may have been one semester where I only took like 8 credits or something like that. But for the most part, it was always 12 credits and up.
For that FAFSA?
For that FAFSA, that sweet Pell Grant. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started into freelance. Does that address your concern?
Yeah, my concern. I'm doing some research right now. I want to do some freelance stuff, so I'm just picking your brain.
Yeah, for sure.
So was a lot of that word of mouth how you got work?
Yeah, it was. So I would say it was probably like 75% word of mouth, 25% just kind of self-advertising. So I would also get on like I'm on a few like film groups on Facebook at that time, because Facebook was the place. I would look for anybody saying, hey, they need a colorist, and then I would drop my reel in there and stuff like that. And I landed a couple of gigs from there, and which also then grew the word of mouth essentially, right? And when I started in color, there was basically maybe like 3 options for colorists in Utah for freelance colorists. And one of them was like the top tier, like he was serving like the most expensive clients. One guy was kind of serving the most mid-tier clients. And so then I was like, great, well, I will go for these low-tier clients to start out.
The commercials.
Yeah. And so that's how I started out. And then honestly, color became so accessible that like all of a sudden like people were undercutting my prices by like half or less. And I was just like, that's when I kind of got out of coloring. I was like, this isn't as lucrative as it was when I started.
Was it just because software got better?
Software got better and people's standards got lower. That's not okay. That's not really aggressive. No, I mean,
People are just worse.
No, it's just like
They don't understand the art.
So like I spent $30,000 for my setup. Like part of that is like one piece of that is like just like a $10,000 like color grading monitor that is like perfectly calibrated and stuff like that. And then like $5,000 that's just a panel to color with. Nowadays people will hire colorists who all they use is like their iMac. It's not properly calibrated. They're fairly accurate, but like I mean that's what some people are using for colorists nowadays. And so it's like that's what I mean by like their standards got lower for what they're willing to accept as a colorist. I mean, and it's easy for that guy to undercut my prices because he's not paying down the $30,000 on his credit cards.
Because their parents just buy them the iMac.
Yeah.
And then they do a side hustle on the side and they make a website.
Yeah. So that's kind of where it became like, well, I can't keep serving this lower tier. So I started up-leveling my prices for a little bit, and then I just kind of got bored of the coloring, you know? It's like I learned it, done it, and I realized it wasn't really my future. And so
I mastered the craft, and you left like a kung fu master.
I wouldn't say I mastered it, but I was pretty dang good at it. But I mean, ultimately, I got into filmmaking to be a writer and director, and I realized there was never going to be a path from colorist to writer director.
It's not clear cut.
There's no, yeah. And so I was like, I'm glad that I had this knowledge because it definitely helped me grow on that path. Like visually, I can be a much more interesting writer director because I know kind of the limits of the images and the dynamic range and contrast and all those things I learned from color. And frankly, a lot of those things apply to writing and stuff too in some ways, like the contrast and things. And so it all served me. I'm a better director for it. And I still occasionally I'll break out the old color gloves and just put the hat on and go spin my wheels for a little bit. But like,
tell your family I'll be back. Don't wait up.
I'm gonna make the next episode of Breaking Bad
about a colorist who starts selling meth.
Everything's tinted blue. It's like, what is going on?
But yeah, so that's kind of like more or less a little bit about my colorist journey.
What happened with the fall? Like you hit that high, and then you're working with us.
No, he said like the money like it just wasn't as lucrative as it once was, and I was just about to ask like pros and cons with freelancing, and then kind of going more into now that you have that experience, because it felt kind of like, or it sounded like it felt kind of just like a grind, and you're kind of putting in your time, getting yourself into the industry. How did that kind of propel you into what you're doing now?
So once I kind of realized I was kind of done doing that kind of work, what kept happening is I would get calls from like clients that I'd worked for in the past and say, "Hey, we want you to do this. We really need it." And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm kind of busy right now." That was code for like, "Oh, that's really in reality I just didn't want. I was kind of done with it." And they'd be like, "Oh, but we just really need it." And like, "Come on, just tell us like how much would this project cost?" And then I would just like basically double what I was paying before. Like, charge me before, like, "Oh, well, actually, it costs this much now for me to do it." And they'd be like, "Okay." I was like, so like they kind of like hold on to you. So
money is a drug, and I'm high off of it.
I'm an addict.
And so like I did that for a while, and it was going pretty fine. But I just literally just kind of hit a point where I was just hitting my head against a wall. I was like, I need to stop doing this. I'm a storyteller more in my heart, and so I literally just like I wasn't being satisfied with what I was doing, and so that's kind of when essentially I made the transition to where I'm at currently. Because I had a good friend working there, and I reached out to him, and he's like, honestly, you should come here because this place, it's a great job, stable, and what he loves about it is it allows him the freedom to also, since it doesn't really kind of tap into your filmmaker brain, he's still doing creative work, but it doesn't really kind of tap into like your creative part of your brain, that he still has energy and like excitement to go and work on his other projects. And I was like, that sounds really appealing to me. You know, at this point, I had only written one feature film in my entire career, and it took me like freaking 3 years to write it, you know, and I was like, that's not a feasible way to become a writer director, right? If I'm only writing one feature every 3 years, divide that by like, I don't know, 80-year life expectancy, and then you know, maybe by the end of all this I have like 10 features that I've written, and probably none of them will be.
Is that why Quentin Tarantino did it that way?
I don't know.
We're doing 9. It takes me 3 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, 2 to 3 years is pretty normal for the actual producing of a feature film. But like writing is not at all. Writing should take you a few months to write a feature. You know.
So where's the holdup? Why that way?
Well, we'll get there.
There's so many people with these dreams, these ambitions, these goals, and they think, oh, like I should just get a job in the field that I want to do. But I feel like what you're saying is a lot of the time, the magic kind of gets lost because you're working on other people's dreams, other people's ambitions, other people's goals. So I feel like it's so smart if you can find a field that's kind of related to what you want to do, but not exactly like it's not going to tap your own creativity. That might be the way to go. Is that kind of your experience?
That's kind of been my experience once I transitioned into this new job. Since being in this new job, I have developed what I think for a television pilot, I have outlined 4 feature films. I've written one of them. I am halfway into writing a second one of them, and I just started writing a third of those. So I have 2 features being written right now. I've completed a new one. I've taken a lot more meetings with people. Like my productivity on pursuing the writer-director is just kind of through the roof, and my mental health is better than it's ever been, like frankly, because you hit your head against the wall. That's not good for your brain, right? And so it's like my mental health is just so much better than it has been, and like because of that, my creativity is better too. And so it's like all the things make a lot more sense now that I've made the transition. Sure, I miss the money, That hurts.
That's the thing I got from this story is that you went 30K into credit card debt and then you got yourself out.
Yeah,
that's what I love.
It's like that just reminds me of the other guys. Remember when he's like he used to be a pimp and he loved that life, but now he loves his life even better because now he's
What was your colorist name? It wasn't Gator, was it?
How'd you know?
It was Picasso.
Let's make that look like Mexico right now. Up the contrast.
You don't understand. I make art. And you're like a title loan commercial or something. Yeah.
They're like, calm down. You calm down.
Do you want to make money or not?
But yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know.
We were at your film career.
Yeah,
you've gone a lot more productive.
Yeah.
So would you say when you took those steps to focus more on your mental health and your dreams, that's when you got more productive?
Yeah. 100%. With writer directing, 100%. Yeah.
I think that's interesting because so many people will. Can you hear that airplane?
That's a jet.
Yeah.
That's a jet. That's loud.
They're coming for the shed show.
The whole thing just gets lifted off.
The cookie wars have escalated.
This is a part 5. We're really
You thought we weren't talking about cookie wars. We're talking about it right now.
I'm trying to be serious. Okay, let me circle back. Let me circle back about your hopes and dreams and your director career. Okay, circling back. I think a lot of people nowadays, they will put other things before their dreams because that's more realistic.
Yeah.
I've done that before where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be a warehouse worker, or I worked in sales for 3 years.
Yeah.
But it sounds like your mental health has gotten a lot better when you just start doing what you love, even though you probably make far less money.
Yes.
You're just poor now.
Yes. You laugh about it, but it's true. I'm poor now. And
I'm in a low tax bracket.
But here's the thing. I feel like the investments that I'm making towards...
You're like, I'm sitting good.
I would say I'm probably about like 3 years away from actually making a lot more money than I had been. Because of the investments I'm making right now.
Well, that makes sense because an investment is you're going to sacrifice like pleasure now for a lot more pleasure later.
Yeah. So
what?
That's one way to put it.
What did you say?
Let me make this a little bit less like I guess sensual, and we'll just say I don't need to buy the new shoes now. I will invest this, and then I'll be able to own the shoe store later.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you for bringing us back around.
Sorry, we were being too serious. I had to throw.
No, you were serious. You got lost in that sauce.
That's 100% what's happening, and yeah. There we go. No thought.
Well, Marshall, before we kick you out of the shed, can you kind of talk about the project you're working on right now?
Yeah. So the biggest project by far in front of me right now is a feature film called El Misionero. And it's a story of 3 Mormon missionaries who take on the cartel down in Mexico. So we will have that.
I was about to say, wait, is there going to be a filter on that?
We will see. Having lived in Mexico and my wife's from Mexico, it doesn't actually look yellow when you get down there. It's surprising. It's not yellow and orange. Mind blown. So I probably won't have that filter on it, to be honest.
I think you're missing out. I think you're leaving money on the table.
I might confuse the audience a little bit. But yeah, so it's about 3 more missionaries take on the cartels down in Mexico, loosely based on true experiences, and it's It's a real fun script. I wrote it. Just the first script feature I mentioned, I wrote one feature over a 3-year period. It was that one. It didn't need to take 3 years. It's just what it took. It placed really well in the Academy Nickel Fellowship, which is a screenwriting competition that the Oscars organization puts on every year. It's gotten a lot of positive
So you've won an
feedback
Oscar?
there. No.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
win it. That's
A
the thing.
prerequisite.
I didn't win the competition, but whenever you submit, they kind of tell you where you play. They say this many scripts submitted and this many lost out before you lost out. Basically, I know that mine was in the top 10%. And when you're out of tens and tens of thousands of screenplays, it feels pretty good, you know?
Yeah.
So did that. And then at one point, I actually was, probably weeks away from putting together a deal to actually make this film when the pandemic hit. So like all the investors pulled all their cards back and it was kind of game over. One of them was a company down in Mexico that ultimately like folded during the pandemic, and so you're just kind of starting over. So we're kind of taking a different strategy for making the film now, which is we're kind of leaning into like the crowdfunding. I feel like it's a very exciting time for crowdfunding, and it's only going to become more and more the thing in the future. We're doing kind of a more traditional Kickstarter crowdfunding for the short.
We'll put the link in the bio.
Yeah.
We'll put
It's going to be down there.
Yeah, we'll put you
Check
as
the
executive
link in the
producer,
bio.
sir.
Give me money. No. So essentially we were starting off by making a short film to kind of show the tone of the film, and then that will be the tool that we use to then fund the larger film.
You know what? If you don't put money in there, first of all, you hate this man.
You not only hate Marshall, but you hate film itself.
And you hate filters, and you hate filters put on Mexico.
Well, thank you so much, Marshall, for stopping by the shed today. Thank you for kind of sharing your knowledge. I feel like a lot of people needed to hear that it's okay if you're not in the exact industry that you want to be in right now, as long as you're somewhere that you can continue to grow and kind of nurture those dreams as, go on.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful for Cole right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really needed to hear that. Thank you again.
Cole, you will be a filmmaker someday if that's what you want.
I'll be a grip someday. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you all for listening in, and we'll talk to you next time.